Should you buy Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry in 2024? Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry was initially developed and released as a DLC expansion for one of the most acclaimed games in the series, Assassin's Creed Black Flag in 2013. In fact, the protagonist of the game is a core character within Assassin's Creed Black Flag, and the story in Freedom Cry focuses on Ade's mission and pledge to help those oppressed gain their freedom in the West Indies. The gameplay is of course pretty much the same as Black Flag, which I admittedly have not yet finished, and it's actually the last Assassin's Creed game I have to play in the entire series. Despite being released simply as a DLC for Black Flag, it is now a standalone game of which you can purchase separately, which is how I personally played it. Anyway, let's get right into the review, of course without any spoilers at all. Getting into the story component of Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry, I'll just go over my general thoughts about the game's story in its entirety, while of course avoiding any spoilers so as to not ruin the experience for you all. From what I've read online, the game's connection to the story of Black Flag is quite minimal, and honestly that could be seen in playing the game itself, as I didn't feel like I was missing out on a certain plotline or anything of that nature while playing this game's own standalone story. The game is fairly short, as I expected for something that was originally intended to just be a DLC to an extremely popular entrant in the Assassin's Creed series, and I finished the game's entire story in about 4 hours, with minimal engagement in the game's limited selection of side activities and just general exploration. The story in Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry is unexpectedly pretty good. I expected it to not retain any level of quality from actual Assassin's Creed games in terms of mission design, and I was honestly expecting the worst in missions, completely focused on fetch objectives and whatever. But the game's mission design and story structure is completely the same as other Assassin's Creed games before it. You've got no modern day plot in this game, which honestly is a blessing, as some of the modern day plot is just egregious and just ruins the flow of the actual story you care about in the Assassin's world, and this made the entire story feel really well connected and paced. It's cut into about 10 memories, of which are of course relatively short, just like the game itself, being about 15 to 20 minutes each. The story in this game is primarily focused on the journey of Adewale, who gets stranded in the West Indies, and through his mission to recover a ship and a crew to leave the island, is embroiled in his desire to help the oppressed slaves on the island to fight for their independence from French occupation. It's a relatively simple premise, but the story works quite well, and it feels really focused and doesn't go on any pedantic tangents of which would ruin the overall pace and flow of the story being told. It's hard to detail the game's story without spoilers, but it genuinely is a pretty good story told in a good time frame of about 3 to 4 hours, and this really focused nature of the campaign makes the experience itself feel really compact and well done, which makes it stand on its own perfectly amongst the other Assassin's Creed games. Overall, the story of Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry is quite a good one, especially for its cheap price, and is much better than what I expected, with Adewale also being a pretty interesting and well-written protagonist that really does complement the overall focused story that is being told. The gameplay of Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry is pretty much what you'd expect in terms of gameplay from the Assassin's Creed games that released pre-Assassin's Creed Origins. This means the combat is the counter-style combat from most Assassin's Creed games, such as the Ezio trilogy of games and Assassin's Creed 3. Of course, the gameplay of this game or expansion is built on the bones of Assassin's Creed Black Flag, which can be told quite obviously as you're playing the game. This is from the game's mission structure and design to the naval combat components and the combat and parkour overall. Let's start quickly, however, with the game's presentational prospects. The game looks exactly like Assassin's Creed Black Flag and Rogue in terms of its graphical components, with facial animations, environments, and the overall graphical fidelity of the game being completely identical with that of Black Flag, which is expected for a game that was originally just intended to be an expansion to Black Flag. However, despite it being almost 11 years old now, the game still definitely holds up today in terms of a graphical perspective, and none of the animations or graphical aspects of the game appeared to me as jarring in any way. Before we talk about the bulk of the game and its parkour and combat components, I'll quickly just lay down a few points on the game's mission design and structure. I've played a few hours of Black Flag, and despite having not finished it yet, one of the biggest complaints I've seen around the game is its sometimes horrible mission design, specifically in the endless tailing and eavesdropping missions or components that are extremely numerous within the game. In Black Flag, this might have been implemented as some sort of filler and padding to make the story longer and to make it feel more comprehensive in its content. But because Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry is, like mentioned before, a much more focused and well-paced experience, there is a couple tailing and eavesdropping missions or components. But because the memories and the missions themselves are quite short, this doesn't feel egregious in any way, and is actually welcomed in comparison to the game's main gameplay loop in assassinations and the liberation of slaves. The much more focus-centric of Freedom Cry makes each mission feel quite distinct from one another, and makes the entire package itself in a mission design perspective just very well done and enjoyable to play through its entire 4-hour campaign. Of course, I didn't dabble much in the side activities, of which was again focused on simply liberating slaves through a variety of different encounters, such as freeing them from a cage, saving them from executions, and liberating a plantation. So the mission design didn't get repetitive for me personally, although it may for you depending on your engagement with the game's limited selection of side activities. Now, getting into a bit of discussion about the game's overall combat and parkour mechanics, I don't think there's much to say that hasn't already been said, so I'll be quite brief. The game's combat is in the vein of the old Assassin's Creed combat style, of which I still love and really enjoy to this day. This means a counter-focused style of combat, as you quickly slash your way through enemies and constantly counter or break their defenses in order to get that killing blow. This also means the flow of killing one enemy and being able to instantly kill another, and as I've said in my old review of the Ezio trilogy, this style of combat is primarily made so fantastic for me by the variety of killing and combat animations that just makes it so damn satisfying to play. Still, even after playing almost every Assassin's Creed game with this style of combat bar Assassin's Creed Black Flag, it still isn't boring, and the combat just again feels really fluid and satisfying to control. In addition to the normal combat, there's also naval combat from Black Flag, and in this game it's pretty much the exact same as Black Flag, even in terms of how you upgrade your ship's armor and the weapon power. Some missions will throw you into the high seas and sink a bunch of ships, which is just always satisfying, and so is the ability to board enemy ships and take down everyone on the ship while looting all the cargo you can find. I really do enjoy the naval combat in these older Assassin's Creed games, even if it does feel a bit janky at times, as it definitely provides some variety to the game's overall gameplay loop in a significant way. Now onto the game's stealth mechanics. It's again what you'd expect of the older Assassin's Creed games. This means a bunch of opportunities for stealth with a good selection of gadgets to help you, such as the usual prospects in the sleep darts, berserk darts, and so on. The use of these gadgets in the game's stealth makes it super riveting to play with, and these games are clearly designed with stealth in the center of the minds of developers, and so each environment can be easily utilized to stealthily kill enemies without the hassle of being detected if you time your kills right. Just like all the other games before it, Freedom Cry absolutely excels in its stealth prospects, and is just as satisfying to land those double assassinations or air assassinations in Freedom Cry as it is in all the other older Assassin's Creed games. Lastly, the game's parkour is once again what you'd expect of these games, with it feeling a little janky sometimes, with there being a few instances where Adewale would just jump off a building to his death, of which I think is a universal experience with the parkour in these older games. But overall, it is quite fluid to control, and the unique environments of the island and foliage make it quite a good place to parkour and traverse around, which again just makes the overall exploration of the world in this game just that much more enjoyable. Overall, the gameplay of Freedom Cry is essentially the gameplay of Black Flag, retaining the old combat and parkour systems, of which I personally really enjoy to this day, and made the game for me in terms of a gameplay perspective a really fun and enjoyable experience. To wrap up, Assassin's Creed Freedom Cry is definitely a game worth buying, and it frequently goes on sale for just $5, which I believe is absolutely worth it for the focused and pretty enjoyable experience you get out of it. The game's story and gameplay are both reminiscent of the older games, and so if you've got an itch for the older Assassin's Creed game style, this may be the way to go about it, and I truly did enjoy my entire experience of playing through this well-paced and focused expansion turned standalone game. Anyway, that's it from me for today's video. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.